All right, so this next section that we are going to be looking at is the United Arab Republic. Very important because it just kind of triggers a lot of things and sets up a lot of stuff and kind of gives you a lot of insight into where Nasir is, what's motivating and driving Nasir in the decisions that he makes. Okay, so keep that in mind as we go through it. So the United Arab Republic is something that is being brought onto the table by Nasir. And so he wrote this book, and you can probably still look it up and read it if you're interested, but it's called The Philosophy of Revolution. And in this book, he wondered what role would Egypt play in the world, right? Specifically the Arab world. Um, a positive role is what he had envisioned. And he understood, and you can see those three rings right there, that Egypt belonged to the Arab circle, the African circle, and the Islamic circle. And this basically creates Egypt's identity. Um, there is an importance, and he recognized the importance of all three, but he placed more emphasis and importance on the Arab circle because he felt that Egypt was the most connected to that out of all the circles, right? So in 1956, um, the Suez War gave Nasir the image of a leader who could do no wrong. So the war that you guys already looked at, um, with the canal and everything. Nasir wanted to extend celebrating this victory of Egypt taking back the Suez Canal to all Arabs. Egyptian victory was the victory of all Arabs, especially when you push away a superpower. Because of this, some neighboring Arab countries viewed Nasir as a threat to their authority. And so it just kind of makes things a little bit murky um, for Nasir in that sense. Next slide. So the United Arab Republic, he's trying to propel himself as the leader of this potential United Arab Republic that would be formed, right? And so Nasir adopted this ideology that became popular a few years before he came into leadership, the idea of Arabism. And which basically this ideology is one that sees all Arabs as one nation, one people together fighting for the same thing, and there's no borders in the regions where these Arab communities have a strong Arab community. Sorry, you can see it in the map, right? Northern Africa has a strong Arab community, which Egypt is included, and then you see like the Middle Eastern region as well. And so he pushed for these views, these similar views that Arabism pushed out, the idea of needing to push for unity in these regions, and basically he gave a strong outline as to why they needed to come together and why being together would make them strong. And so the points were that one, that they were all close to one another, making unity easier. And it's true, you can see right there, they're all pretty much connected, right? You just go over to the next country and you're in another Arab nation. Um, the locations of all Arab nations combined gave them access to three continents. So you can see Northern Africa, the Northern African Arab nations give them access to Africa, right? And then the Middle East gives them access to basically touching Asia, right? Because it touches Asia, and then but as well, it gives them access to Europe because it also touches Europe. So the idea is like they have access to all these regions, important regions of the world, three continents, very important, all of that. In addition, oil existed in abundance in these areas, which means profit, right? Profit to work on things that are very important. Um, Additionally, when Nasir published the National Charter in 1962, he defined the unity that would come from all Arab nations as socialism. Make sure to highlight that, okay? Pause if you need to, I'm moving on. So the idea of unity began when Syria approached Egypt in forming a union on January 1958. Nasir, he put this out there, but he didn't go out and say, hey, let's form a union. Nope. Syria was the one that started it. And so you have to keep that in mind going forward. The union of both of these nations created the United Arab Republic on February 58, and a constitution was created even though it was rushed, which you'll see that it's the reason why, not the reason why, but maybe one of the reasons why this union did not last long. Because Syria basically realized that the union with Nasir would mean that, you know, What Nasir meant was he wanted to incorporate Syria into Egypt. So Syria left on September 1961. Um, the main reason this union fell was because Egypt was stable, a stable country, with a very popular ruler that had a planned economy and just kind of was solidified, stable, right? While Syria, on the other hand, was unstable and suffering from division. And basically, Egypt kind of made the wrong assumption. He thought that maybe that Syria wanted to be adopted into Egypt's brand of social, political, and economic stability. And, he thought that by bringing stability to Syria, that eventually they'd start to go in that direction of where Egypt. And that's why Syria felt like Egypt was trying to incorporate them into Egypt. And so that's not what Syria wanted, right? Next slide. So, a second attempt at unity happened in 1963 between Iraq, Egypt, and Syria. All three signed a formal agreement, but nothing really came out of it. So, this also means a failed union. And the reason why nothing really came out of it is because all three had their own idea of what it meant to be Arab, right? Ideological differences are being defined in different ways. And so, it just didn't come true. It didn't go through. The announcement of the UAR overall, though, was a warning to other states, and therefore you see Western countries increasing their presence in Arab nations like the British in Jordan and the United States in Lebanon, um, while at the same time, the failure of the Union, once it failed again, was a major blow to Nazir. Despite this, though, he still maintained these ideas of Arab unity and refused to admit he was wrong. And maybe he wasn't wrong, he just didn't execute it in a proper way, especially with the first one. When you look at Syria, um, the constitution was rushed and there was miscommunication about the intentions of what this unity meant. And so, and maybe the same thing with the union, with the second attempt of Iraq, Egypt, and Syria coming together and having those differences. How, it just, I don't know. Yeah. Next slide, which is also the last slide. So there was another attempt again with Yemen, which, spoiler alert, also did not work out. This ended up proving that there was this unity within the region. There was a lot of things that, a lot of people fighting within each other, with one another, right? And so in 1962, a civil war in Yemen breaks out. The loyalists in the country sought assistance from Saudi Arabia and Jordan, and the military Republicans who were basically training away sought help for Nasir. Um, Turned to Nasir for help, and it makes sense though because Nasir kind of did the same thing in Egypt. Remember, he was part of the military, and the military kind of turned on the country, and that's what you see happening in Yemen during this time. This, however, was a drain on Egypt's finances because they did agree to help um, the soldiers, the Republican soldiers, um, and this financial aid that they were giving these soldiers was actually something that was very much needed by Egypt for their economic reforms, and so that suffered. They suffered because of that. Because all this money was being poured into this war. In addition to that, around 70K soldiers were sent, and 26K of them never made it back to Egypt. So a lot of lost lives, a lot of hurt and distrust, right? And this war lasted about 5 years. 5 years of money being poured into a civil war by Egypt that was not going their way. Um, the country of Egypt suffering economically because these funds are not being used to help Egypt and instead of being used on the civil war. This last, and this embarrassed Nazir, and you see this impact his popularity. Um, and it also kind of shows that it's like if you are preaching Arab unity, why in the world are you funding this civil war between two Arab sides that are clashing? That shows the opposite of Arab unity. But anyways, that is it. That's all I have. Have a good day. Bye.